welcome back to this series on circle theory in Chinese medicine and classical physiology. This is part 3, and in this part, we'll break it down into a few presentations because we're going into the number 5 and 6, and there are several parts to this, and they're all really important. So I want to take it slowly and just go through it in a really methodical way. So I'll start by sharing my screen. Start the slideshow. Okay, so when we're talking about circle physiology, which is, as we've seen from the previous lessons in yin yang and yin yang turning into 3 and opening up into 4, that these all relate to circular movements. And as we go up in numbers, we'll see that that doesn't change at all. And really, that as the numbers grow, it's just allowing for a more complex expression of yin yang coming from separation in the pre-heaven into right relationship and connection in the post-heaven bodies of the myriad beings. So in this section, we'll be talking about the number 5 and 6, and primarily that is going to refer to the Wu Xing and the Wu Yun. The Liu Jing is, the Liu is 6, so Liu Jing and Liu Qi. As we go, we'll get definitions of all of these. However, to start, I'd like to read something by an author that I started reading probably more than 25 years ago, named Suki Colgrave. And she has a book called Between Heaven and Earth, and it's all about yin yang. And she wrote, "I do not think that we can become conscious of anything which at one level we do not already know, and which we are not in some way prepared for and willing to recognize." And then she goes on, "The empirical confirmation of these concepts can only come to people who have worked with them and experienced their validity, both in themselves and in others. This alone may give some grounds for their being considered objective and of general value. But for this to happen, the reader must be willing to cooperate with the material in such a way that a purely intellectual grasp of its contents is complemented by an intuitive and imaginative response. The ideas demand for their full understanding to be inwardly explored in the light of each person's own experience and half-forgotten memories." So to me, she's saying that these are embodied teachings, and when Qi Bo asks us to face south, he's asking us to participate. And so I want to really encourage this kind of exploration in really, spending some time thinking about heaven above and earth below, and ourselves as this interaction, this ongoing interaction between heaven and earth, that heaven is always pouring into us on behalf of our lives, and that we are always expressing that back out again into life, and that cycle is constantly going on. And feeling just what that feels like, being aware of the sun appearing to go around the earth, and how we get sleepy at night, and our yang goes underneath as it follows these cycles in heaven. So kind of engaging with it in your own bodies, it can be very helpful for learning. And really, when I approach a classical text like the Neijing, there's kind of all of the grammar and what do the characters mean, which is really challenging and difficult. But then there's also, what does this really mean? And that's often something I use my imagination and I use my experience of being a living human being to the understanding of that. So I want to invite this kind of participation because these are embodied teachings. And if you have any sense as we've gone through this of when we're talking about yin yang and we're talking about the number 3 and Jing, Shen, and Qi, where there's a real resonance with this way of looking at things, kind of like, oh, that makes sense. To me, it's what Suki is saying, that you already knew it and now it's being articulated in a way that really resonates because it's already known in you as, yeah, that's how it feels, that's how it works. Okay, so there's a lot of confusion between 5 and 6, and certainly I've been really confused about 5 and 6, and it's been kind of a journey of mine to try to tease this out in a way that would be useful as well as accurate to the classical texts. So just to talk about some of the confusion, just what are the wuxing? The 5 elements, the 5 phases, dynamics, agents, movements. Does it relate to the Zangfu? Is that what the 5 elements are? The spleen, stomach is the earth element. The liver, gallbladder is the wood element. Like, what are these wuxing? That itself, like, people have translated this word xing in so many different ways. So maybe there's confusion, like, what does this even mean? And in the Neijing, the wuxing are talked about as much as, or maybe even the wuyun are talked about more, the wuyun. And that's translated in different ways as the 5 periods or movements or motions or orbits, circulations, or the 5 transports. So there's this idea of the wuyun. And then we have the liujing, which is maybe the 6 levels, the 6 confirmations, the 6 channels. What are these 6 things? And what are the 6 G? Are they pathogens? Are they evils? We have the 6 Qi, which is wind, cold, damp, dry, heat, and fire. Like, what are they? Are they pathogens? Are they evils? And there's confusion about that. And then where do the Zangfu fit in? So we have liver is wood, but we also have liver is Zhuiyin. And the heart master is fire, but the heart master is also Zhuiyin. The fire has heart master with Sanjiao. And just a note to say that I'm translating it as heart master because it's also called the Xinju in the Neijing. And I think pericardium isn't quite accurate to how it's conceived of in classical Chinese medicine. So we'll just call it the heart master. So, is it paired with the liver or is it paired with the Sanjiao? And how do these things interconnect with each other? And it's often quite vague. We'll sort of say, well, it's the liver, so it's Zhuiyin. So are we talking about the confirmation of Zhuiyin, or the, what if then it's wood? The liver is wood. So you can see what I mean, that there's just confusion about where the Zangfu fit in with the Liujing and the Wuxing. So there's a lot of mingling of the 5 Zang with the Liujing. So, the kidney is Xiaoyin, the spleen is Taiyin, large intestine is Yangming, liver is Xiaoyang, whereas liver is Shuiyin. So there's kind of a conflating of the zong with the conformation. And this actually is really problematic because, just as an example that comes up a lot in clinic and when we do case reviews with my students, is just somebody is constipated, so we know they have stasis in their large intestine, and there's a tendency, oh, the large intestine is Yangming, and what do we do in Yangming? We purge with bitter ingredients. So if we conflate large intestine with Yangming, we're going to be purging way, way more often than we should be. So large intestine really isn't the same as Yangming, because sometimes constipation can be related to the blood being dry and deficient, the yin being dry and deficient. It can be related to the spleen being deficient and damp, not transforming water properly. And that's actually very common. So we have to untangle this and make sure we're not jumping from zong to one of the Liu Jing, or we'll get into trouble. And that's what we'll be doing in learning about this physiology, is helping to tease that apart. Also mingling elements with the Liu Jing. So wood is Xiaoyang, water is Xiaoyin. But wait a second, Xiaoyin is kidney and heart. So isn't fire Xiaoyin? Or, but fire is also Xiaoyang, but is Xiaoyang wood, or is it fire? It's got the triple heater. So there's confusion when you conflate one of the Wuxing directly with one of the Liu Jing. It will be inherently wrong sometimes. So we have to tease that apart. How do we talk about these things so it doesn't get confusing? And then also there's confusion about what a Liu Jing approach is. And what we learn about in school is really that it's these 6 levels that are about an external pernicious influence coming in from outside, maybe a cold influence coming in from outside, which is the superficial level, through all the levels, with the Shuiyin being the deepest. So that's something that we learn that I think is profoundly wrong. At best it's profoundly limited, but I think it's actually wrong, and we'll see what I mean as we go along. And that the 6 qi are considered pathogens, so we have the 6 qi, and we see them as pathological wind or pathological cold, pathological damp, and there's more ways to look at that are more accurate to the classical texts than this view of the 6 qi. There's also in the world of people that practice classical Chinese medicine, there's kind of this split between TCM versus classical, and that Zongfu diagnosis is sort of put in with TCM, so it's kind of looked down upon, like, I don't do Zongfu diagnosis, I do classical. It's based on the Shanghong and maybe on the Neijing, and so I don't do Zongfu diagnosis because that's modern Chinese medicine and it's not as good as the classical. And this is actually really inaccurate as well, because certainly the Zongfu were discussed at length throughout the whole of the Huangdi Neijing, and the Zongfu are definitely mentioned in the Shanghanlun. And so what's the relationship of Zongfu with classical Chinese medicine? How does classical Chinese medicine think about the Zongfu. So really the problem with TCM is not that it has a Zongfu perspective. The problem with TCM is more what's called the Bianzheng Lunzhi, which is differentiating the pattern to determine the treatment, which sounds good, but what that sort of gets translated into is going from some kind of symptom like constipation and saying, okay, there are 8 different things constipation can be from, and you're trying to fit your patient into one of those patterns. And that can be, just extremely problematic because your patient might fit into a couple of patterns, or your patient might have constipation and headaches too, and maybe they have painful periods. And, so you have to go to 3 sections all with different categories. And, so I'm sure we've all had that experience of trying to find our patient in the book, which is what we're trained to do with TCM, and not being able to find a pattern that really fits our patient. And to me, what that really means is that we're not actually diagnosing our patient and seeing the pattern that our patients are exhibiting, or and having a way to articulate that and then connect it to functional treatments. Instead, we're trying to fit our patients into predetermined patterns. But again, the Zongfu are in the classics. So I would not say that that is that looking to fit our patient into a predetermined pattern is what the Zongfu are about. And in fact, people that practice classical, what they call classical Chinese medicine, are often doing the same thing, trying to fit their patients into a pre-existing pattern. So how do we not do that is a question of diagnosis, which we're not doing right now. We're doing physiology, but while we're doing physiology, we'll be kind of looking at what are the Zongfu and how do they fit in to the picture of the 6 Jing, the Liu Jing. Okay. So when we are trying to resolve 5 and 6 and learning how to work with 5 and 6 in a way that is functional in the clinic, I want the way I'm resolving it to be consistent with the classics. So we want to explore the classics. And, there are lots of ways to interpret many of the lines in the classics. But what's important is that the way that we're interpreting it isn't wrong, that it isn't adding something that's not there, or going off into a fantasy that it then disconnects itself from what the classic says. And through this, I've just done my best to try to stay with that rule. And when I add something that isn't there, noting it with brackets and explaining why I am adding that. And so through this exploration, we'll be looking at many lines in the Neijing in this presentation. And I really want to invite everybody to check it for yourself. That the Chinese will be mostly looking at chapter 66 today. And, that chapter is available online. There's translations of the Huangdi Neijing, and you can see what you think about my translations. And it's something I firmly believe is that translation at its best is a conversation and not a static document that you create. So this is really, I'm presenting this as my input into an ongoing conversation that will probably never end. And I would also say that I am such a beginner at understanding how to read the classics compared with some people who have, gone into a deep study of reading classical Chinese. So I apologize for any errors and invite feedback, and hope that at least the extent to which I do know it and I bring my own sensibility to it, hopefully is correct, and also that it's illuminating. Something I look for in my interpretation, my translation is, does this illuminate something for me in a way that helps me understand something much better? And is it clinically practical and helpful? Like the sense of like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand. That makes so much sense to me. So it's not obscure and obtuse. And, there's a lot in the classics. If you just read, Unschild's translation that I have here of the Huangdi Neijing, there's a lot that's so obscure. You're just like, wow, what are they talking about? And so when I'm translating, I want that sense that it's so obscure to be illuminated, like, oh, it becomes not obscure. And it's really a really profound hope of mine through especially these next parts of this class on physiology, that you get really excited about the Huangdi Neijing, because as it gets revealed and you understand, wow, this is not obscure. This is so clear. Look at what the Yellow Emperor and Chibo are trying to teach me. And now I can actually understand what they're trying to teach. And it's beautiful and profound. So I hope you get that sense and it excites you to go into it more deeply, study classical Chinese, study with people who read the classical Chinese or have some understanding of it, because it's quite incredible. Okay, so we're going back to chapter 5 of the Suen and touching back with this quote, which is actually repeated elsewhere in the Huangdi Neijing. It says, as for yin yang, they are the pathways, the Tao of heaven and earth, the organizing web or the guiding principles or the guide ropes and connecting threads of the myriad beings, the father and mother of change and transformation, the beginning and end of birth and death, and the residence of spirit illumination. To treat disease, one must seek this root. So here, we're looking at this again because we're going to look at yin yang through the number 5 and through the number 6. How these numbers are an expansion of the way that yin yang are bringing heaven and earth into relationship and then coming into right relationship within the beings, and how the number 5 relates to that. So we're always coming to this because here the text tells us we have to seek this root. And what is this root? It's yin yang. So we're not leaving yin yang behind, and now we're going to talk about the wuxing, the 5 phases. We're not moving into the 5 phases and leaving it behind. The 5 phases are an expanded description of yin yang. So this image, we just really want to see this yang coming from heaven, rooting in yin, steaming yin up to receive more yang from heaven, and how this is what's going on all around us and within us. And when we face south, we see that there's the rising in the east and the setting in the west, and that yang is beneath us and inside of us, stored deeply through the night. And now we're coming right up on the winter solstice as I'm recording this. And so, the yang is, it's not that there's diminished yang in the winter. It's that the yang is in storage during the winter. And you can just really feel that the ground gets so hard, and there's not much yang showing above the surface. Okay, so we already looked at yin yang interacting to create the person, which is the 2 becoming 3. And we also looked at how with 3, we now have a person standing on earth. When we have a person standing on earth with fire, meaning the sun traveling around the earth or appearing to travel around the earth, the 4 directions are then defined in time. So we move from 3 into 4. So you have sunrise in the east, noon in the south, sunset in the west, and midnight in the north. Now we have the person that's in the middle of the 4 directions, and that is 5. And remembering also that when it's an even number, it creates that tension between the polarities that creates movement, that also creates something still in the center of that. And we saw that as 2 were polarized and created 3. Now we have 4 divided into 2. We've got spring, summer, fall, winter, yin yang, and there's that polarity, and that then expresses the center, which is 5. So it both creates that center, but also that center is again the qi jiao. That's the qi interaction, the qi pivot in the number 5. So now we'll look at the number 5, this wu, which in the Neijing is the wuxing or the wuyuan primarily. There are other things that are talked about with the number 5, like the 5 flavors or the 5 organs, things like that. But mostly we're talking about the wuxing and the wuyuan. So we'll start with some definitions. So the Neijing refers to both the wuxing and the wuyuan. The xing is translated in different places as elements, phases, dynamics, dynamic agents, or as agents. It can also mean to do or to carry out or to go. And so all of these there isn't a right one. There's only images that sort of give us a feeling for what this can mean. And this yun is translated as transport or revolve, or Unshul translates it as the 5 periods, or as movements or motion. But there is a sense of circular motion with the character yun. The Neijing associates both of these, the wuxing and the wuyuan, with circular motions and with these correspondences. So wood corresponding to birth, fire corresponding to growth, soil with maturation, metal with decline, and water with death or completion or storage. We see that in nature, like now this time of year, like all the leaves have died, everything in the garden died, so there's death at this time of year, but also the young, there's also the sense of things being complete, like the growing season is complete now, and the young is going into storage. So all of these things are going on at this time of year. So it's quite important to see that the wuxing and the wuyuan are associated with the circular motions and that this has to do with birth, growth, maturation, decline, and completion. Okay, then we have the 3 yin and the 3 yang. So these are talked about in the Neijing, 3 yin and 3 yang. We also have the 6 qi, Liu qi referred to. And then underneath that is Liu jing, and that's the 6, whatever they are, confirmations, channels. We'll see, I'm using the word great sweeping motion for this character Jing. And so here the Neijing refers to the 3 yin and the 3 yang, and names these specifically as the 3 yang being Taiyang, Yangming, Shaoyang, and the 3 yin being Taiyin, Shaoyin, Jieyin. And the Neijing also refers to the 6 qi, the Liu qi, associated with these, which are the sultry heat. And just a note that I translate the summer heat as sultry heat because there's a sense of the humidity, and the sultry heat is also associated with steaming, as we'll see, kind of steaming up moisture from the earth, that hot, damp qi. And so I'm calling it sultry heat because I think that word sultry gives that feeling of the damp, hot quality. And cold, damp, dry, heat and wind. And we see that there's 2 types of heat here. So these are the 6 qi, and each of these qi is associated with one of the 3 yin or 3 yang. In the Shang Hanlun, Zhang Zhongjing never refers to the Liu Jing that are referred to in the Huangdi Neijing, or really talking about the 6 anything. He doesn't really call these 6 things, these Liu Jing, by any name. What it does refer to is them by name. So Taiyang, Yangming, Shaoyang, Taiyin, Shaoyin, Jieyin. But he never calls them Jing or anything else. He does refer to diseases, like in Shaoyin disease or in Yangming disease. But he never refers to the Liu Jing at all. So what about this Jing? So here I have a translation of a paragraph in Su Wen 5 that's inspired by reading Wilms's translation in Humming for Elephants, but not just the same. The emperor said, I've heard that the sages of high antiquity discussed the patterns of the human form in accordance with the deeper organizing principles, arranged and differentiated the Zong and Fu, and laid out the channels and the vessels in a network of vertical stems, which I'm associating with the Jing, these channels, they're vertical stems, and horizontal branches. The Mai are the horizontal branches. Okay, the joining and opening through of the 6 pairings. And what are the 6 pairings? Are like the 12 channels. So we have like stomach, large intestine are paired and create Yangming channel. The heart master and the liver are paired and create the Jieyin channel, etc. So the joining of these and the opening through of them, you know, that opening through sort of has this idea of being an open channel that's actually connecting things. And what is it actually connecting here is our bodies with the between heaven and earth. You know, it's connecting our bodies to the influences of the celestial objects. So we're communicating with those through the 6 pairings, the 12 channels. So The joining and opening through of the 6 pairings each follow their own channels, with chi holes emitting each at their own place. These are the divided sections for the coming and going of chi, these different chi, like heat, summer heat, wind, cold, damp. So the coming and going of chi, each having its ordered patterns. The 4 seasons yin yang is, in its entirety, these Jing connecting threads. So really, we can start to see that the Neijing and Su Wen Fai is like laying out the physiology for us. And it's not just the physiology in my body, but it's really, how is my body connected to the pre-heaven, heaven and earth? How is it connected to that? Oh, through these connecting threads, which are these Jing, these channels, and they open through to allow something to be communicated into my body. So these Jing are vertical lines connecting heaven and earth and running through our bodies, bringing in the 6 chi that creates and manages us. So again, the 6 chi are the sultry heat, the cold, the fire, the wind, the damp, and the dryness. So we have a sense that these chi are what actually create us and continue to manage our bodies. So they aren't pathological substances. They're actually all together, they create this beautiful balance that creates a body. So the 6 chi are really, really important for the health of our bodies, and the 6 chi come in from heaven into our bodies. So the chi, the channels that Jing brings in, it initiates the wuxing. And the wuxing are birth, growth, maturation, decline, and death of all things. So we have these channels coming in, and they create a being, and that being grows and grows and grows and declines and completes itself. And all beings are going through this cycle, and there are cycles within cycles in our bodies, and they all follow this pattern of arising, growing, declining, and completing. So the 6 Jing communicate and interact between heaven and earth to generate, maintain, and complete the myriad beings. So we have yin yang going around to create and manage the person. So we're starting to get a bit of an idea. Okay, then in that same chapter in Su Wen 5, the emperor said, yin yang, they are the guide ropes and connecting threads of the myriad beings. And then from Liu Lihong, he said the yellow emperor refers to yin yang as the warp and the weft, literally the systematic arrangement of a lead rope and a net that is holding together. Yin yang hold the pattern of the myriad beings. So these vertical lines are Jing, the lateral lines are the Lo or the Mai that we saw also. So we have this pattern, but what's important now, because we're looking at the number 6, is this vertical line that is the channels of our body. This warp, these vertical lines, the Jing also means the warp of a weaving, are the vertical lines that are often invisible. Like when you make a weaving, you can see as the weft is formed, the Jing lines have become invisible. And so the same is true in our bodies. We have a body that is the form that's actually created by and maintained by invisible channels within our bodies. And the horizontal threads are the weft. Heaven hands down the images and earth completes the form. Sorry about that. Hold on. You can tell something really dangerous is going by. So pause there. Okay, sorry about that, but here we are. Okay, so this is from the Neijing, this idea, heaven hands down the images and earth completes the form. So how do the image of what heaven wants to create, how does that image come down? It comes down through the vertical lines, through the Jing, through the channels. And that is how earth then completes the form. So there's actually something there. So here is also, there's something Jingdu, which means longitudinal. So the vertical lines on the planet are the Jingdu, and they're vertical or axial, like they form around in relation to a central axis. So that's also like our bodies, and it's extending in a direction essentially perpendicular to the plane of a cyclic structure. So that's what we're saying the body is, a cyclic structure, and these Jing are perpendicular to the plane of the cyclic structure, and that we also have the central axis that they are relative to. Okay, we saw this slide before with the number 2, that the father and mother of all changes and transformation, that yin yang are the father and mother. And we saw these characters, Bian Hua, the foundation and beginning of giving birth and taking life. So, you know, giving birth, Hua, and it changing to decline and taking life, is that process seen through the number 2. And what we're going to do is see that process now through the number 5. So now we have birth, growth, maturation, gathering, and completion. So these are the wuxing. These are the 5 phases of life, according to the Neijing. So the wuxing are wood, birth or conception, fire, development, soil as maturation, metal as decline or gathering, and water as storage, completion, or death in all beings. So we have, you know, birth, growth, maturation, and then decline and death. So we see it in ourselves, that we go through this cycle. And that is a yin-yang cycle. So on the left, we have growth, you know, development, maturation, decline, death. And then new beings are always born. So this is an expression of yin-yang. So it's the Hua on the left and the Bian on the right, which is looking at it through the number 2. Then we look at it through the number 5. So it just divides it into more stages. So the seasonal cycles of birth, growth, maturation, decline, death are tied to the Earth's orbit around the sun, or connected to celestial cycles between heaven and earth by the guide ropes and connecting threads. of yin yang. So the seasonal cycles are birth, growth and maturation, decline, and death and storage, so that things can be born again. So this cycle, as we know, is dictated by heavenly cycles. So we have the Earth's orbit around the sun, and that's where we get all of our different seasons. So we're seeing how that cyclic movement in heaven creates birth, growth, decline, and completion. And this is also yin yang. You see, as a yang is underneath, it's being stored. And then in the spring, it starts to push up the yin. And then it matures, that yin that has yang in it, matures in the summer. And then it falls away and declines, going back towards yin in the fall. That this is a cyclical yin-yang process that creates all of this. So we start to also see how health is really going to be being aligned with these natural processes in our bodies that actually create us and run our bodies. And so Bien is over there on the right, and things have gone to their extreme and change. And Hua is over there, things coming into life, is how the Neijing talks about it. So there's a question, are the wuxing associated with heaven or earth? And I've been having this conversation with some people, you know, where do we put this? Like, if we're going to say one thing like the Liu Jing and the wuxing, where do we put them in terms of heaven or earth? I associate the wuxing with earth because these cycles occur on all things and beings on the soil. These are cycles that happen on beings on the soil of the earth. Of course, the cycles themselves are created by heavenly movements, you know, so then that way they're associated with heaven. But where do these cycles, what do they affect? They affect bodies of things that are born and die. So that which causes the cycles of birth to death, waking to sleeping, high tide and low tide, all of these kinds of cycles, what causes it are the stars, the sun, the moon, the planets in heaven. And hence the Neijing the wuxing are sometimes associated with heaven. So for example, in chapter 5, it says, heaven has 4 seasons and 5 phases, and wuxing. And through these, there's birth, growth, gathering, and storage. So it seems that in the Neijing, it's associating the 5 phases with heaven. And of course, this makes sense. But it also says that heaven hands down the images and earth completes the form. And for me, there's a consistent sense of the relationship between the forms on earth and the 5 phases of life within that form. And more often, the Neijing associates these phases with earth. And we'll see that as we go along. And my suggestion is to associate the wuxing with earth. And you'll see why as we go along, and why this gets to be quite practical as well. Then at the same time, I want to be able to see that it also makes sense that they are associated with heaven, because it's these heavenly cycles that cause these phases. So it's not right or wrong at all. It's more, for me, about the practicality, you know. So if we look at it in a way that the 5 phases, and how the 5 phases are associated with earth, how does that help us ultimately in clinic? Okay, the whooshing associated with earth. So the same chapter goes on to say, right after this, it says heaven has 4 seasons and 5 phases, and through these there's birth, growth, gathering, and storage. Through these there's cold, sultry heat, dryness, dampness, and wind. And then it goes on associating a chi with heaven and a xing, a phase with the earth. So it says quite clearly, in heaven it's wind, on earth it's wood. So the chi is associated with heaven and the phase is associated with earth. In heaven it's heat, on earth it's fire. In heaven it's dryness, on earth it's metal. In heaven it's dampness, on earth it's soil. In heaven it's cold, on earth it's water. Excuse me. Maybe at this point I want to just make a note that the Yellow Emperor and Chibo, they don't talk about things that they don't think are super important for us to understand. So maybe this just seems sort of poetic, but I really want to, encourage us to really think about it. Like, why are they making such a point of this? And they make this point over and over again and tell us how important it is. So I think we'll see as we go along how this is important, that the chi are associated with heaven and that these phases are associated with earth. Okay, so now we're going to move on to look at chapter 66, and we're going to really go through the whole chapter here. It's the great treatise on heaven's primary connecting threads, which, as you know already, I think of as the channels. This chapter lays out the relationship between the whooshing and the liujing, the 6 chi, heaven, earth, and the segments of the 10 heavenly stems and the 12 earthly branches. It differentiates heaven and earth and describes how heaven connects to earth and all beings and how all beings connect to heaven. That's what this chapter is about. So we have the 10 stems and the 12 branches, the earthly stems and the heavenly branches. And we'll be talking about those some. And we can see that, and these are the associations in Suan 66, that there's 5 xing, soil, metal, water, wood, fire, and that 10 is 5 doubled. So each one of these has a yin aspect and a yang aspect, which makes each one doubled, which gives us 10. So the 10 heavenly stems are associated with the whooshing. And I believe these are heavenly because they're the way that the earthly beings are connecting to heaven. Whereas the 6 chi of each of the 6 jing, again, that doubled is 12. And of course, we have the 6 doubled because we have Shao Yin is heart and kidney. And so that doubled is going to be 12, the Ziwu, etc. So we have 6 doubled is the 12 heavenly branches. Sorry, I think I got that mixed up as I was just talking. The 10 stems and the 12 branches. Okay, so we start to see the connection in this chapter, and we've seen it in earlier chapters too, but here it's very explicit, and we see the connection between the number 5. You know what it is I have these wrong up here. I have the 10 stems with the character for earth and the 12 branches for the character for heaven. So that should be switched. the 10 heavenly stems, the 12 earthly branches. Okay, so that is right everywhere else. So sorry about that. Okay, so but anyway, so we have this this connection between the wuxing and the stems and the liujing with the qi for each of the jing, and that's associated with the earthly branches. So here, now I'm not any kind of expert or even very knowledgeable about the stems and branches. And, you know, a lot of times the stems and branches are thought about as, you know, I'm not sure how you say the word, but about the calendar and about the movement through time and these different segments and what's going on at the different segments and what you might be able to expect in terms of the weather in the body, the weather outside of the body. And I'm not looking at it in that way at all. I'm looking at it in a very general way about the physiology of the body. So these stems, these 10 heavenly stems or trunks, are heavenly because they connect the myriad beings to heaven, and they're 10 because each phase has a yin-yang aspect, and they relate to the zhang and the fu. So fire has heart, small intestine, earth has spleen, stomach, metal has large intestine, lung, water has kidney, bladder, and wood has liver, gallbladder. So we all know that. And so the trunks in trees are where transformations take place. You know, so we sort of have this idea, you know, that the branches with the leaves are receiving all these influences from heaven, and where it starts to transform and turn into form is in the trunk, you know, and that trunk then actually is what grows branches, and branches also breathe out. So it goes back up out to heaven. But these trunks are where that heavenly energy is received into in order to create form. So here's just another way to picture it, that there are these trunks. And so here we have, you know, earth with the wuxing, and these trunks are connected to earth. And there's yin aspect and a yang aspect of each of the trunks. Okay, now we have fire doubling. Like when we want to go from 5 to 6, you know, it's interesting to move from 5 to 6, because what happens is that fire doubles. And what fire doubling actually means is that fire is actually moving. And so we know with even numbers, there's movement, things are tense and have a tension between them because of polarities. And when there's a number 6, when there's an even number and there's movement, and what is it that's moving? It's fire. Fire is moving. And this we'll see is, you know, talked about very explicitly in the Neijing. So fire doubling creates a 6. So we have the fire, that's the emperor fire and the minister fire. The fire, emperor fire, associated with the heart, and the ministerial fire is associated with the Bingmen and the lower jiao. So when we go from 5 to 6, we have this doubling of fire, which is, here's a static image, but it really represents the fact that fire is vacillating. It goes in between, it moves constantly. So hence fire doubling represents the movement of the life force into form and back out again. And so that's also where we get the branches. You know, so the branches are fire coming in, transforming, and going back out again. And we'll see, eventually we'll look at some diagrams of the body with the channels, and we'll see how these channels reflect this idea of the stems and the branches. So the 12 earthly branches connect with the heavenly chi, heat, cold, wind, dry, damp, and fire. The 10 heavenly trunks convert those chi, wind, cold, damp, fire, dryness, sultry heat, into form. And what does that form do? It gets born, it grows, it matures, it declines, it dies. The 12 earthly branches are the channels of the body, and the branches both receive influences into the trunks and exhale or express it back out again. And so what are these leaves, responding to? Are the movement of the celestial objects, like the sun going around the earth, or the moon rotating around the earth. And of course, we know that the sun going around the earth is relative. But these kinds of cycles are the ones that influence the chi and the channels that the chi moves through, these 6 chi. Okay, so now we're going to kind of read through chapter 66. So heaven has Wu Xing, which manage the 5 positions so as to grow form with cold, sultry heat, dry, damp, and wind. Humans have 5 Zong, which transform these 5 chi. So we have these Zong that take that chi in and generate that into joy, anger, thoughtfulness, grief, and fearfulness, which to me is summarized as human expression. So we have these Wu Xing, which manage these positions in our bodies so we can grow form with the chi that's coming in. And humans have these 5 Zong, which transform these chi and generate that back out into human expression. And then the Yellow Emperor asks, how is this linked to the 3 yin and the 3 yang? This is that cycle of yin and yang, always going back to it. Okay, so it says now, the Wu Yun, these 5 movements, these 5 motions of yin yang are the pathways of heaven and earth, the guide ropes and connecting threads, original principles of the myriad beings. How can one not understand? Therefore, coming to life is named Hua, transformation. Reaching the extreme is named Bian, change. Yin Yang is the invisible realm and is named Shen, or spirit. Spirit functions without being one of the 4 directions. And I have in brackets, why isn't it in one of the 4 directions? Because it's radiant and everywhere. And the Neijing says, and this is named holy. I think that's just beautiful. So there's something going on with spirit that's not associated with any direction that causes this bianhua, these changes. Now about the function of bianhua in heaven, it's inscrutable, it's unknowable, it's the invisible realm. In humans, it's these pathways, and on earth, it's transformation, it's coming into life. Hua. Hua on earth generates the 5 tastes, or the 5 delights. So in a way, the 5 tastes are, if we think of it as the 5 delights, it's like our ability to like desire and take in life, life from the earth. The Tao generates wisdom, the inscrutable generates Shen, or spirit. this invisible realm. Keep going back to yin yang. Then it says in heaven, Shen is wind. On earth, it's wood. In heaven, Shen is heat, and on earth, it's fire. In heaven, Shen is dampness, on earth, it's soil. In heaven, Shen is dryness, on earth, it's metal. In heaven, Shen is cold, on earth, it's water. So you have this sense of these chi being out in heaven and coming in and becoming, condensing into form from heaven. And the first aspect of this form is wood, fire, earth, metal, water. Therefore, in heaven, it's a chi, and on earth, it becomes observable form. Chi and observable form, they resonate with each other. And here, this resonate is also they communicate with each other, you know, they interact with each other. So we have chi and observable form interacting with each other, coming into life to generate the myriad beings. I hope you see, to me, this is just so beautiful. So, okay. And hence, heaven and earth are above and below the myriad human beings. So this Tian, Di are above and below the myriad beings. The left and the right are the pathways of yin and yang. So something comes in, which in that downward movement is related to the west, and it goes back out again towards heaven, and that is on the left. Then water and fire are the manifestation of yin yang. This is going to be important for us. Why pick out water and fire as the manifestation of yin yang? And we'll see that as we go along. Metal and wood are the end and beginning of all that's born. So metal and wood, you know, we have fire and water, and those are actually the generation of life, and wood is the beginning of that life, and metal is the end of that life. And then it says the chi, which are the six chi, are less or more. Sometimes they're more, sometimes they're less. And so the form is flourishing or declining. And here it doesn't mean in like flourishing, it's doing well, and declining, it's not doing well. It means naturally things flourish and decline. Even like I wake up in the morning, I'm flourishing, and in the evening, I'm declining. So the form is always flourishing and declining. Even my pulse comes and my pulse goes. You know, so all of these rhythms are related to the movement of the six chi. All of this up and down, flourishing and declining. And this is all through the above and below, calling on each other and convening, and therefore there's increase and decrease in the visible realm. So the invisible realm, we have this visible realm. And we can see what's going on in the visible realm, but why is it going on? Because of the invisible realm. And as doctors of Chinese medicine, we are working with the invisible realm. That's what we're learning how to do, is to learn how to perceive and work with the invisible realm so as to affect the visible realm. And to the extent that we're really trying to change the visible realm and change the form of the body, we're not going to be nearly as powerful or successful as if we're working with the invisible realm. I wish to hear of the ruling seasons of the Wu Yun and the five motions. And then Shibo goes on and says, the five chi circulate through the phases, each ending in a full year or a day. And I put this in bold because I think this is super important, because really like this idea of the year and this is a cycle that has all these little segments throughout the year, is one way to think about it. But another way is like a full year or a day. And he says it's not just the seasons they rule. And I put in brackets, it's all of these nested cycles, whether it's the cycle of the seasons, the cycle of day and night, the cycle of the pulse rising and falling, that they all correspond to the same rules. The great void is boundless. It is the beginning foundation of the source coming into life. It is that which the myriad beings depend on to come into existence. The five circulate forever, spreading the true magic of the 6G and comprehensively uniting the earth vitality, like the vitality of beings on earth. Isn't that beautiful? Spreading the true magic of the 6G, named yin, named yang, named soft, named hard. The obscure and the obvious take their positions. In other words, the invisible realm and the obvious realm, they each have their place. Cold and sultry heat, relaxation and tension. There is constant generation and transformation as the myriad things come into existence. So again, we had this special place of fire and water earlier, and now we have the special place of cold and sultry heat, which are in these positions. These chi are in these positions. So what's special about cold and sultry heat? And again, that's something we'll understand later. And to me, it's super important in our work. So above and below calling on each other. What does this mean? The Yellow Emperor asks. Chibo, cold, sultry heat, dryness, dampness, wind, and fire. The three yin and the three yang receive orders from above. Wood, fire, soil, metal, water, and the fire that's inside of the water are the earth's yin and yang, and birth, growth, transformation, gathering, storage resonate with below. So you can see why I think of the wuxing as relating to earth, because it's these phases that are inside of living beings, the phases that living beings go through. So cold, sultry heat, dryness, dampness, wind, and fire. These are the yin. So we have here damp, dry, and cold, and that's associated with the yin side. And why do we put yin on the right? Because that's like, but when summer starts to change into the yin phase, so it's going into the yin phase, ending with the yin within yin in the north, the cold. And these are the yin and yang of heaven. And the yang is going up on the other side. So we have fire, wind, and sultry heat. That fire is now the ministerial fire. And that's going to be going upward, creating movement, which is wind. And then finally, maturation, which is the fire in the sultry heat. Wood, fire, soil, metal, and water fire are the earth's yin and yang. Birth, growth, transformation, gathering, and storage resonate with below. Heaven has yin yang, and the earth also has yin yang. Wood, fire, soil, metal, water fire are the yin yang of earth. And again, they keep repeating it. And this results in birth, growth, transformation, gathering, and storage. So here we have the wood on the left, and Mu is related to birth. We have fire here above. That is related to John growth. And then metal with Sho, which is gathering. And the water / fire down in the north, the water that holds the ministerial fire, is storage. Okay, the 6 chi that resonate with heaven circulate ceaselessly. The chi that resonates with earth is still and guards its position. The movement and stillness call to each other to convene. Above and below reach toward each other. So the stillness is us, like relative to this circulating movement of all of the heavenly objects. We're sitting here on earth, basically holding still. So these things that are staying in place are reaching towards each other and connecting and convening. So yin yang commingle, and this is how there's coming into life. Heaven uses 6 as the segments, and earth uses 5 to create. 6 is the cycle of heaven's chi, 5 is the arrangement of earth. The imperial fire uses illumination, like this radiant light, but the imperial fire, that's the post-heaven fire, the ministerial fire, is in the position in our bodies. It's meant to be in a fixed position in our body. So it uses position, being in the right position in order to carry out its function. Okay, so here I just want to remind us of what we talked about in the first section of this course about gradients, and here this idea of quiet and stillness call on each other to convene. And so here again, we have these gradients, and when they get large enough and sufficient free energy becomes available, a cycling structure will spontaneously emerge that enables that gradient to dissipate more effectively, because the universe wants to produce entropy at the fastest possible rate. It will actually create organized systems that help it achieve its thermodynamic goal more efficiently. So I think we can really see that this is describing the same phenomena of how life gets created as the science of thermodynamics. And here, above and below reach towards each other, yin and yang commingle, and this is how there's coming into life. And here, nature as an open system must resolve the gradients and will organize around the most efficient way to do this, which is to cycle. Nature creates organized structures through which to resolve, such as living organisms infused with cycling processes. So we are this open system that must constantly take in light from heaven in order to maintain order in our bodies. And when this stops, we completely dissipate. Okay, so now we have a little more of an idea about the 5 and the 6, and how the 10 stems relate each to, 2 stems relate to each of the Wu Xing, and that these are the trunks, and the earthly branches. It says in this chapter that the Ziwu movement is Shaoyin heat, tying together the Liu Jing with the Liu Qi. Chou Wei movement is Taiyin damp. Yin Shen movement is Shaoyang fire. Mao Yo movement is Yangning dryness. Shu Chen movement is Taiyang cold. And Sohai movement is Zheyin wind. So these are the 6 chi coming to earth. And it says this is what is called the root. Okay, so now going to a few things in chapter 67 of the Suen. It says, earth is below man and within the great void. And Huangdi asks, is it supported And then Chibo answers, the great chi or the grand chi holds or initiates it. And here I want to point out that these 6 chi are physiological. So life is initiated, and it's really saying that these 6 chi are what molds, almost in a way of sculpting life, where dryness dries it and the sultry heat steams it, wind moves it. Wind is sort of that movement of life. Damp moistens it, cold hardens it, and fire warms it. And again, we've got wind and cold are going up, are below, and they're going up. So we can see here the cold Han down at the bottom, and then wind on the left in the east, they're below and they're going up, where dryness and heat are above, going down, and that the damp is in the middle. And then it says that the fire vacillates and travels back and forth between them. So that really is giving us that picture of fire, the imperial fire being above and the ministerial fire being below, and that it's the fire that circulates throughout our body. And then here it is again, it is through cold and sultry heat, these two. So the cold down at the bottom and the sultry heat up at the top. It's through cold and sultry heat that the 6 enter. So these are sort of the primary 2. And we'll talk about this as we go along. The cold and the sultry heat, the fire and the water. And this causes the great void to generate and transform into life. It's the cold and the sultry heat are the first chi that interact and allow the other 6 to enter, and that this then generates and transforms into life. So here, the great treatise on the 5 cyclic movements is chapter 67, and it says the activity and stillness of heaven and earth is put in order with connecting threads, these qi, by the Shenming, which is the spirit brightness or the spirit illumination, and the rising and falling of yin yang. So we have this cycling, and I have a wheel here. We see that the wheel has 6 spokes to it. And so this is kind of representing the Liu Jing. And and they are in heaven, and it's spinning. And here it's related to the movement of the sun around the earth, spinning. And that this spinning is also within me, within each of us. And that's what causes all birth, growth, maturity, decline, and death. Whether it is the pulse or the breath or the sleeping cycles. We'll look at some examples of that. The great turning, it's what I call the great turning, which is the universe around us, and then this turning is also in me. So here's one cycle where going up in the left, there's the birth of an egg, and the egg matures to the point that it's released, like the fruit on a tree matures to the point of ripeness, and then it starts to disintegrate, just like the endometrium breaks down, and then there is completion. So just reminding that in chapter 66, it said the 5 chi circulate through the phases, each ending in a full year or a day. Saying it's not just the seasons that they rule, it's all these cycles. It's the cycle of conception, very beginning, and growing, starting to mature, and then getting ready for completion, the birth of a baby. That's also this cycle that is governed by the same laws of yin yang and wuxing. So this image is just to show the nesting cycles, all of which follow the same principles of yin yang. So this is from a book that I am working on translating with two friends of mine, Andy Shu and Marnie Ergel. And it's a book all about the explanation of yin-yang charts of the Shanghan Lun. And here it says, in the wuxing, the mutual generation sequence of wood, metal, soil, fire, water reflects the rules of birth, growth, transformation, gathering, and storage of things. This is the course of all things, from emerging into being to withering away. The mutual generation of wuxing is the relationship of the mutual promotion and support of each of the wuxing. Within this process, wood engendering fire is the stage of emerging into full bloom. Metal engendering water is the stage of diminishing into death. Water engendering wood is the stage from ending to new emergence of being. Fire engendering soil and soil engendering metal are stages of life's growing and withering away. Soil is the in-between segments within this process. The soil gestates the causative seed of the next generation. So we're saying like this, that the soil element can be either in the Shang cycle between fire and metal, but it can also be in the middle as the ground that sustains the other transformations. Taking agricultural patterns as an example, from sprouts peeking above the soil to the abundance of foliage, this is the image of wood generating fire. From the abundance of foliage to the ripening of the fruits, this is the image of fire generating soil. From the ripening of the fruits to the withering of the leaves and harvest, this is the image of soil generating metal. From the harvest to the storing of seeds and sheaves of grain, this is the image of metal generating water. From the storage of seeds to sowing of them into the soil, this is the image of water generating wood. Within this, the time of ripening of the fruit is the transitional period from the abundant foliage to the withering and harvest. The ripe fruit can serve as the seeds for next year's crop. Therefore, soil gestates the causative seed of the next generation. And then again, this cold and sultry heat and fire and water are taken out especially. The activity and stillness of heaven is put in order by connected threads by the Shenming spirit illumination. The rising and falling of yin yang, cold and sultry heat are the manifestations of this. Left and right are the pathways of yang and yin. Fire and water are the manifestations of yang and yin. Why does Qi Bo emphasize the sultry heat and cold and the water and fire? How is this related to water and fire being a manifestation of yin and yang? To understand this, we have to first understand the Liujing as great sweeping motions. So this idea of great sweeping motions, we have here like a picture of the movement of the stars around the North Pole. And so these are really the representative of great sweeping motions, just as the sun going around the earth or appearing to go around the earth is also a manifestation of great sweeping motions. But basically, it's a term that I invented, and I use it to describe the 6 Jing. And it's really the Neijing that inspired this image. And here's some more great sweeping motions, this time of the planets. So the channels are ceaselessly flowing between heaven and earth, bringing in the 6 Qi that create life. The Zong are in fixed positions in the body. The body is born, it grows, it declines and dies. And the Liao Jing are these great sweeping motions. The 6 Jing, the Liao Jing, are the great sweeping motions that allow us to bring in the motions and the qualities, the Qi qualities from heaven, so as to generate the Wuxing, birth, growth, development, maturation, storage, completion, death. So in the next presentation, we're going to be looking in more detail at each of the 6 great sweeping motions, the Liao Jing, which I call the 6 great sweeping motions, and you'll see more about how each of them works to bring in their own particular Qi. So thank you very much, and I will see you in the next presentation. We'll see even more about yin yang coming into right relationship. So thank you.